Of DLA Night. I've got with me today Brent Adamson. I'm sorry a little bit late, but actually he and I were chatting because we kind of do that beforehand. Brent, just so you know, I can't find my copy of the Challenger sale. I think I've lent it out to somebody, but I do have the Challenger Customer, which is an awesome book as well.
Thank you, Tim. Truth be told, it's actually, if I may, the better book. That's just one man's opinion. I keep my Challenger sale under the desk here to keep the table from wobbling. So
Yeah.
that's yeah, it's all good. It's, no offense taken.
It's probably one of the books that I think that comes up if you talk about sales books and book lists. It's probably the one that is always on someone's list, some shape or form, unless it's some list and it's a whole bunch of mates that they've created. But usually, when people are honest, it's usually the one that's on everybody's list. What we wanted to talk about today was about why or what's changed in buyer engagement.
Yeah, and there's a lot there, isn't there?
Yeah, and in only 20 minutes.
Good luck. And go. So where should we dig in, Tim? What would you like to chat about?
Well, when we talked and we did the preparation,
Yeah.
You talked about there being a process where you'd seen product selling, solution selling, being a thought leader, which was then Challenger. And then in a situation where, funnily enough, you mentioned this just before we came live, that customers are then overwhelmed. And then it's about being helpful. So talk us through where you see where we've come from and where we are now from a sales perspective. Because I think there's a lot of people that out there that like to understand from Brent's perspective where we are staking the ground.
So this comes from, sad as I might, as it is to admit, from a lot of years of doing this. I don't know when, at some point in my career, Tim, maybe you're in the same boat, you actually can declare historical perspective, but I've now arrived, and it's slightly depressing, but that's okay. But if I look back across, I've been a professional for 35 years, but about 20 of those have been specifically in researching sales and B2B sales and marketing, complex sales. And if I think, Tim, across those last 20 years, so when I entered the field out of academics, it was just right around the turn of limit. It was about 2002, 2003. And it was interesting at that time, all the research we were doing at a company called Corporate Executive Board, which became CEB, which then became Gartner. All the work that we were doing in the sales practice at Corporate Executive Board in the early 2000s was all around this shift. You'll remember this, the shift from moving from product selling to solution selling. Do you remember this? When said, we need to, yeah. So the idea was, products can now are easily replicated, which leads us into commodity pricing, fast followers. There's new technologies, there's new international entrants, which made it very hard to compete on individual products. And so the idea was, if I'm going to escape the commoditization trap, if I'm going to demand a fair premium price for my offering, I need to cobble together something. Cobble's a little unfair, but I need to put together something bigger than just an individual product. I need to not just offer a product to the market, but a solution to the market, something that solves customers' specific business needs. And so two things there. One is, on the selling side, we need to figure out, all right, what are our customers' business needs? So it led to a lot of discovery and figuring out what our customer needs so I can better address them. And then on the strategy side, it led to a lot of capability build out. So a lot of M&A activity, a lot of organic growth, where you take you build out your capability set. You surround your products with services, for example. So the idea is that, I've got all these capabilities, and 1 + 1 + 1 = 4, that the sum is greater than the individual parts, and therefore I can offer you something that you couldn't get by just piecemealing it in individual products elsewhere. It made a ton of sense. So I'm not here, nor was I then here to claim that was a bad strategy. I think it was absolutely mandatory that you go on that journey. And much of our research across sort of 2002 to 2010 was all about so we were writing studies around things like simplifying solutions execution, I think was one of the studies we wrote, because it was hard. It's complicated to build those solution sets. Now, so that ran for about 10 years, and there was a lot of complexity around it. But a lot of companies did that really well. And Tim, you'll know, we can point to any number of examples of companies that built out just very quickly and very broadly these really world-class solutions. My best example, I think, is And it's all positive. But take someone like FedEx versus UPS, Global Logistics. So one started with planes, one started with trucks. One was overnight, one was ground, and over time they both the one that didn't have planes bought planes, one didn't have trucks bought trucks. They both bought retail outlets, and over time they built out these global infrastructures that are world-class global logistics solutions. The only challenge is they both did the same thing at roughly the same time. So fast forward 10 years where they found themselves, and all these companies went on solutions journeys, not in a bad place. Like, you would woe be unto you if you chose not to do that. But nonetheless, that window of differentiation, that window of opportunity to differentiate based on that solution was diminishing over time as others went on that same journey. So 2010, rough 2008, global financial crisis, 2008, 9, 10. What we found is a lot of our clients at the time at CEB were saying, solutions, now we're getting not just commoditized on products, we're getting commoditized on solutions. We need a new sort of frontier of differentiation. This is right about the time the Challenger hit, along with the GFC of the global financial crisis. There was obviously an urgency to find new ways to compete to drive growth, but also I think it was this waning, the mega trend was the waning of solution selling as an opportunity to differentiate yourself. So it was kind of perfect timing in a lot of ways, Tim, wasn't it? Which is, if we're not going to compete so much now on what we sell, we still have to compete on what we sell, just to be clear. So that window doesn't close. You still have to have a world-class solution. You still have to beat your competitor on the solution capabilities. But that's harder and harder and harder to do as those differences become smaller and smaller. So what's the bigger incremental opportunity for differentiation? Much of our research indicated it wasn't so much around what we sell, but how we sell, how we go to market, the kinds of conversations we have with our customers. For us, that became this thing we called commercial insight. We wrote the books on it. But interestingly, Tim, I think parallel to that, and independent for those who, quote unquote, didn't get on the Challenger journey or maybe never encountered the books, there was still nonetheless, I think, an embracing of this idea of thought leadership. If I could go to market with better content and demonstrate to and I used to hear this all the time, still do. If we can go to the market and demonstrate to our customers that we have world-class leading insights and expertise that help our customers with their cutting-edge solutions, their mission-critical priorities, we're going to build trust that we're the leading provider, and they're going to come to us first with their toughest challenges. And so we all kind of got on this content bandwagon. Seems a little bit unfair, but there you go. Whether you call it commercial insight, whether you call it thought leadership. So around 5 years later, so 2015, you remember marketing developed this whole new strategy called content marketing. And all of a sudden then we had MarTechs, we had technology to do this at scales. And then we had better new data to allow us to do this around 2017, 2018. So across that 10-year span from 2010 to roughly 2019, 2020, we all got really, really good at building and deploying massive amounts of not just content, but quality content. And so if you fast forward then another 10 years, so we go from 2000 to 2010 to 2020, where we are now, I think, is a place, and I wrote a lot about this in this article called Sense Making for Sales, which is in the Harvard Business Review in January, January 2022. And this is all based on, just give credit where credit is due. A lot of the work we were doing at Gartner and CB, it didn't come out of my head. It came out of a really crack team of researchers at Gartner. But the idea being that customers are now not just overwhelmed with information, they're overwhelmed with high quantities of quality information. So you're telling me to zig, and you've got data, you've got research, you've got experts. They're telling me to zag, they've got data, they've got research, they've got experts. And so now I'm just confused at a higher level. I call this the smartness arms race. It's like and I think the smartness arms race has ended in a tie. So there's just as the window of your ability to differentiate based on your product is diminished, not disappeared, but diminished, then the window of opportunity to differentiate based on solutions diminished. I think now we're seeing the window of opportunity to differentiate based on insight and thought leadership is diminished, which is not to say, Tim, that I'm not suggesting therefore what should I do, Brent? Should I say dumb things instead? It's not like no one's going to unilaterally disarm in a smartness arms race. So that's not it. But I think what we need, and we're on the cusp of, and where we are now, in fact, and that's where we should go next maybe, is what's the next big incremental opportunity for differentiation? If those windows are not closing, but narrowing, is there a new window that's opening? And I think that's where a lot of my thinking is right now.
Okay. And so, I mean, I can't remember, Mark Schaefer wrote an article about the fact that that we are overwhelmed with content. And as you say, good content. And we're all empowered with mobile phones. So where do we go? Now there is a lot of rubbish content, and you know, there's I think it was even Blake who's just put a comment in, who said that I think is, you know, 90% of or 95% of content is never read. But the fact of the matter is there is a lot of good content out there.
Well, Blake, and I wouldn't suggest that the answer be, gosh, if we could just get them to read another 10% of the content, that would solve everything. I would imagine that, and nor do I believe you're probably saying that. I imagine it would just exacerbate the very problem. So if I could, Tim, I think where we are now is, and this again, I'll credit to this, is like the last couple of years that I spent at Gartner work on some really just incredibly profoundly interesting research around customer confidence. And the
Yes.
thing that we consistently found at Gartner more than anything else, and because all of our work around selling or sales and marketing eventually seem to always come back to buying and how customers make buying decisions, not just how they buy, but how they decide. And the thing that we kept finding, and I still see today, is that what we're really seeing is customers need to have confidence in their ability to make broad scale or large scale decisions on behalf of their company, particularly in these large buying groups. And if that group of people doesn't feel confident to pull the trigger on even a medium scale decision, they're ultimately just going to say, we better either let's just not do anything, or they're going to say, let's study this more, let's look at this more, let's consider this more. And they're going to get continually even more wrapped
So
around the
we're
axle
talking
with more
about business
information.
to business enterprise where people are
That's right.
making large scale decisions. It could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
And there's a buying team of, well, last time I looked at the figures, it could be 10 people. One of
Yeah,
our
easily.
clients, who's a supply chain software vendor, tell me there's 100 people involved in
I'm
stakeholders
not
involved
surprised.
in this.
Yeah. Well, by the way, just as a quick aside, though, Tim, I think it's super interesting because this phenomenon of lack of confidence. Well, all the work I've done is most of the work I've been involved in has largely been around B2B and enterprise. I was also involved in the B2C marketing practice at Gartner, and you see the same thing on the B2C side, the consumer side. And the reason why is because what we're talking about here isn't a enterprise phenomenon, or it's a human phenomenon. And just to show you what I mean, think about us as consumers. I don't know about you guys, wherever they've got listeners all over the world. I'm in the States. And here in the States, as is often the case, I do a lot of buying on Amazon, as my whole family does. 90% of what we buy in this house seems like it comes in through the front door in a box with a
Yep.
smile on it, right? So for those, about half of your listeners, our listeners will know what I'm talking about when I say this, but there's this really interesting phenomenon when you're shopping on Amazon, because you've got all this information and I can socially norm, right? I can see what other people like me, what they bought, what they like. So I can read a review and another review and another review. And then, people like this also bought that, but people like that also bought that. At some point, I'm just overwhelmed. It's 2:00 in the morning and I'm just trying to buy a $15 gadget. And I still haven't pulled the trigger because I'm just completely overwhelmed. I think, well, what if like there's FOMO or fear of missing out? There's like, the social norming I can't stop doing. And so what's interesting about this, Tim, is Amazon, kind of knowing this may happen, has kind of got your back. They literally have a button on the app or on the website called Save for Later. So you could just defer the whole thing.
Yep.
You just click Save for Later, go to bed, say, you know what, I'll come back to it. I often tell this story, so I often check because I just find this fascinating. My wife, who's amazing, has 1,500 items saved for later on her Amazon account. That's 1,500 buying decisions that got deferred or stalled because she just either got frustrated or she just got like, I just ran out of time, or she just couldn't stop. She couldn't pull herself out of learning mode. And I think that's what's happening in B2B and B2C. Is again, it's not a company phenomenon. It's a human phenomenon where in getting overwhelmed, we can't just seem to overcome the escape velocity of a buying decision or make the buying decision, which I think is super interesting.
And I think it's a great thing about Amazon, which is that they've taken as much friction out of the buying process as they can. Apart from having that screen that I always get about Amazon Prime, which I always click through.
Right.
But actually, that confuses my mother. She won't buy off Amazon because it confuses her, but she's 85. I've got
I
five.
feel 85.
I've got 5 things in the save for later thing. Maybe that's a blog. There's a blog in that. I don't know.
It's fun to think about, but also then Adam raises an interesting point about truth. Like, we live in this post-truth world. Much of my graduate work way back when I was doing political science in German was in post-structural, a philosophy and post-structural colonial theory and things like that. And you get into Foucault and Derrida and linguistics, and you begin to question the meanings of words, and all that super interesting until you see it actually play out in our politics. Then it gets actually terrifying, right? But now we're seeing it play out in commerce as well. And so I think the whole thing sums up, Tim. So if you think about bring it full circle to this opportunity for differentiation. In a time where customers are really lacking confidence to pull the trigger, then I think there's three underlying drivers of confidence erosion. There's three forces eroding customer confidence, and it isn't about the economy, which, by the way, I think exacerbates, just makes things harder. But I think the reason why customers struggle to decide is not because of the economy; it's because of their humanity. And the three forces that really make this hard are: one, decision complexity. So it's all the people involved, all the stages. I don't even know how my company makes decisions. There's decision
Yeah.
complexity. There's information overwhelmedness, if that's a word.
Yeah.
Let's call it, and the third one is value, what I would call value opacity. It's just like it's unclear. And this goes back a little bit to Adam's point about, is this really valuable? Am I going to get the value from it? How do I measure value? And if I'm not sure how to navigate my own decision making process, if I'm not sure which information to prioritize, and if I'm not sure how I even define value, I'm going to sit on it, right? I'm going to think harder, and research more, do more work, or just defer the decision down the road. So the opportunity for differentiation today is, how can you as a seller or as a sales organization, a marketing organization, solve for customer confidence? So it goes from what we sell to how we sell to how we help, and specifically how we help our customers not feel more confident in us or our product or our brand or us as a seller and become a trusted advisor. How can we help our customers feel more confident in themselves and their ability, despite all of these forces, to make at least decent, educated, defensible, there's a good word,
Yes.
decisions on behalf of their organization? And I think that the supplier, the sales rep, the whoever it might be that we're talking about here, who can make customers feel that way, to create that feeling in themselves of the customers like, I feel good about this, I feel confident about this, I feel we can move forward. That's who's going to win in this world.
Mm. So you talk about being helpful being the next stage. So how do you see sales evolving, and what's this next stage that's coming?
So as much as I'm kind of known as, along with Matt, my co-author, and a lot of us are known as the challenger guys. I don't know if I'm known
Yeah.
as the challenger guy, but we're known for the work, and the heart and soul of that work, many will know, is about frame breaking. So identifying a customer's mental model of how they think about their business, and then so you build the model, you break the model. So we call that frame breaking. By the way, I stand by that. I think, if nothing else, I geek out about it because it's fun. I'm a contrarian at heart, so that's why I love to do that. Book
Yeah.
in many ways is autobiography. But I think there's this really interesting moment right now where we can move our mindset from frame breaking to frame making.
Right.
And one might argue it's splitting hairs, but I think there's a real difference, at least in mindset, which is not so much how do I figure out what you think and break it, which is a simplified and somewhat unfair articulation of challenger, but rather, how can I just help you? How can I provide you a framework? How can I provide you a framework for information? So here's what I mean by that is, here are the 3 or 4 questions that probably matter most. So it's an acknowledgement to your customers. Look, there's a lot of information out there. I would imagine it's pretty overwhelming. As we've worked with other customers like you, it's my all-time favorite phrase. And working with other customers like you, one of the things we found is, if you can answer these 4 questions in a way that you feel good about, that you're gonna be able to make some progress. So in other words, I'm not telling you what to think. I'm not telling you the answer. I'm just providing I'm chalking the pitch. I'm narrowing the field, giving you a framework within which you can operate with a little bit more confidence. I can do that around information. I can do that around buying. So in working with other customers like you, we found that there's three steps you got to go through. You got to get procurement involved. You probably want to get them involved early. When you do, here's 3 questions they're going to ask. So that's, we call that buyer enablement. So buyer enablement is around the buying process, sense making around information, and then value, which is the world I live in now at Ecosystems, the company I just joined, around here's how to think, here's some ways you might think about getting value, here's the outcomes you're trying to achieve, here are the KPIs that other companies like you have used to determine their progress against those outcomes. So I call this a framework for buying, or a framework for deciding, if you like. This is really what it is: a framework for buying, a framework for information, and a framework for value. These are different kinds of frameworks that one can build in a frame making process. And the whole idea is, it's very Socratic, I think. It's the whole idea is to provide frameworks within which your customers can come to their own conclusions in a more confident manner. Because that's what you're solving for, is customers' confidence. So one last thought on this, Tim, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on, but I get all excited about this because I think it's really interesting. Because notice your role as a supplier, and this is a little scarier in the sense that, what do I do if I give them confidence and they choose someone else? I mean, that's always the question of everything ever I've been involved in. Same thing used to
Yes.
happen with Challenger, right?
Yeah.
But I come back to there's a guy named Brian Smith. It's Brian with a Y. Brian is the chief strategy officer at a company called Expedient. It's a cloud computing company. He's brilliant. I spent some time talking about what they're doing at Expedient in the sense making article. And I've back when we used to travel early on prior to the pandemic, I was doing his sales kickoff, and I heard Brian say to his team, I'll never forget it. He said to his entire global field sales team, he said, "Our job as a supplier is to help our customers make the best decision they can in as little time as possible.
Right.
And if that decision is for someone else, so be it. We'd like it to be us, and we'll do everything we can to make it for us. But I need them to one make a decision, not just just kind of just draw this thing out. Or it's like, how do we help them make the best decision that they can, that they feel good about in as little time as possible? The old thing about like if you're going to lose in sales, lose early, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the way to look at it. I love that phrase because I think it captures so much of what this is all about, which is how can we help our customers make the best decision that they can, that they feel really good about, and how can we do that in as little time as possible? And then there's some graduate level things around how do we skew that in our favor. But I don't. Do you buy that, Tim? What do you think? What's your
I think I think that's great advice. I mean, there's a saying, isn't there, that time kills a sale.
yeah,
And I know that Keenan did a piece to camera the other day about it's not about, but at the end of the day, his conclusion was it's about helping. And
yeah,
what we do is that we help people make decisions, and it may be for us, it may be for someone else, but ultimately it's about supporting that decision. And I think I'm with you, which is I think that we have this situation where people are scared to make decisions. I'm going to get fired.
yeah.
And what we need to do is give them the comfort. And it's not about us because we've kind of proved that because we're on the short list of 2 or 3. So we don't need to prove anything.
Yeah. I'd sum it up with a simple phrase, which is, we spend so much time, particularly in sales, saying, how can I get them to buy? That, right?
Yeah.
It's a little crass, but that's, if I boil it all down, that's kind of what we talk about, right? So how do I get them to buy? And I think the better way to think about it today is how can I help them decide? And that's a
Yes.
very different mentality. Rather, how do I get them to buy? How do I help them to decide? And because in many ways, what we have here is not a buying challenge; it's a deciding challenge, and that's our role. Is to I think the incremental opportunity we have is to help them to decide.
So very quickly,
Yeah,
when we talked in the past, you said that there were 3 things that were really key right now, which was community, partnerships, and ecosystems.
yeah.
Explain it.
So this is something I saw coming over the horizon at Gartner before my departure. Over the last year or so, it was very interesting. When you talk to many or sales leaders, commercial leaders, marketing leaders, as one does at a place like Gartner, um, you kind of have your finger on the pulse. It's always interesting to see how these trends kind of come over the horizon, sometimes out of nowhere. And about 12 months ago, 3 words in conjunction with one another came over the horizon very quickly. Again, as you mentioned, it was communities, ecosystems, and partnerships. And I think it speaks to this broader um, phenomenon or set of phenomena that we're talking about here around one of the best ways to go to market. I think in this environment is together as a broader solution. In some ways, I think it's the extension of the solution selling play, where I'm
Yeah.
taking my capabilities and matching them with someone else's capabilities and going to market together, but doing it in partnership with our customers. So we're collaboratively with our customers, sitting down to figure out what's most important for their business. What are they ultimately trying to achieve, and how can we work together to build those outcomes? I think there's a longer story, maybe for a second conversation sometime, Tim, around the tech industry and PLG, or product led growth. If you think about product led growth, that goes all the way back to that first phenomenon of we're going to compete on product. And it's interesting because when you're a product-led company and you're trying to compete on product, at some point you don't have to worry about solution selling and fast replicators because you've got an exit. You just like, I need to sell this thing before I get to the point where that window closes. And so
Yeah.
it changes the math and the mentality of the whole thing. So I think that in some ways what's happening is a lot of our friends in the tech industry are seeing this, spam the world with BDR and SDR calls. Is like, I think we all know that time is over, right? This is not working because one is we're all tired of it, but two, once you stop working, it works when you're working off a small denominator, because anything works when you're working off a small denominator. But as you get bigger and bigger and bigger, you can't scale those kinds of activities, and so that's when they find that there's no more juice in the lemon to squeeze, and so they're looking for a new way to compete, a new way to go to market. And I think that's where this idea of partnerships and ecosystems becomes really important, particularly for small companies. It's kind of like the school of fish. You know what I mean? It's like if I'm a fish, I gotta school together. And I think that's what's going on. Is that's the way you compete with the shark? Is you band together and make a big school. There's some weird mixed metaphors going on there. I'll fail to explore right now, but you kind of get the idea, hopefully.
Fantastic, Brent. So, unfortunately, time's up. I've actually got two questions because I put a note out internally and I said I was interviewing you, and I got two questions. So, Eric Doyle, who works for one of our partners, came up and he actually mentions the page of the Challenger, but you, maybe like me, I don't even remember writing my books. So when someone comes to me and says, on page 23, you wrote this, I used to have to get the book out and actually have to have a look. But anyway, on page 18, you talk about 5 sales reps profiles. Do you remember that?
Well, I mean, the whole book is about the 5 profiles of sales reps. So
So do those 5 sales rep profiles, do you think today they still hold up?
I do. In fact, if you ask our colleagues over at the Challenger company, which ultimately was spun off by Gartner, they continue to gather data on that. The thing about those profiles, and I've always said this, is the worst thing you could ask yourself, or at least the least accurate thing you could ask yourself when looking at those 5 profiles. There's a hard worker, relationship builder, challenger, lone wolf, and problem solver. The natural tendency, Tim, when you see those 5 profiles, is ask, which one am I? Or even more fun, which one are you? And I would always encourage people to actually not ask that question, because the basis of the research, we go into some in the book, and it's a longer conversation, but the research was based not on personality types or talents or traits, things you were born with. They were based on behaviors and activities. So the question is not which one am I? Am I a challenger? Am I a relationship builder? Rather, irrespective of whatever I think I might be, what are these challengers doing that's so different? How can I do some of that too? And I think that's a better way to think about it. But I think those activities still hold, but now within this broader context of the confidence challenge, which was nowhere on our radar screen 10 years ago. So I'd say yes, with a caveat.
I mean, what Eric said to me was that when he read the book, he realized he had 15 lone wolves reporting to him.
I've heard that a lot.
And I see that a lot. And then I think he stepped back and there was there's actually a little bit of everything, as a salesperson, I like to take control, because if I don't take control, I need to be in control of the deal.
100%. Most sales reps, in some way, at least good sales reps, have a little bit of the control freak in them. I totally relate, by the way.
So the second part to the question, Brent, is with those 5 sales rep profiles, he said in the back of the book, there is a fantastic table around those 5 sales reps profiles and the impact on hiring.
Yeah.
Do you think that does that still hold? And what's your view on hiring against those 5 sales reps profiles?
I think so. So we did a lot of work over the years around hiring profiles. Much of that has gone over to the Challenger organization. That IP, they now own most of the IP of the work, and I would say yes, but so the hiring for challenger behaviors or challenger skills, demonstrated challenger skills, I think is really, really important. So your ability to teach, tailor, take control. These things don't have to be mutually exclusive. The other things I would look for today would be, and probably always would have all along, is empathy and curiosity, right? If you're going to solve for how customers feel about themselves, in fact, at the heart and soul of Challenger truly is actually empathy. It's that blue book you just held up in the very back of the book. The word empathy is nowhere in the book except for one spot. It's in the acknowledgments at the very, very end of that. I buried it like an Easter egg, but that entire book is about empathy. So trying to get into the shoes of your customer, see how they perceive the world. What is their mental model? The thing I used to say is, if you're going to challenge the way a customer thinks about their business, what's the first thing you have to understand? And it was, is their business? I would say no. If you're going to challenge the way a customer thinks about their business, first thing you have to understand is how they think about their business. You need to build their mental model. You need to see it from their perspective, so that you can find ways to challenge it diplomatically and professionally. But today, I think in addition to that is this idea of, I need to understand just how hard it is for my customers to buy. I need to understand the emotional impact of trying to herd the cats and the credibility on the line. And what if we get this wrong? That's always been true. I think it's now more true than ever before. What's the mentality of someone clicking save for later? I've just spent 3 hours trying to buy a $15 product on Amazon. I click save for later. That is not a joyous moment. That is a moment of a defeat of like, oh, fine, I'll just go to bed, or fine, I'll just buy something. If you can get into the head of your customers from that perspective and understand that emotional journey and tap into it, not in a manipulative way, but in an empathetic way, and just be there to be the one that provides help, I think that is super powerful. Now, how you hire for that, there'll be professionals out there in hiring would know better than I would how to find it and profile that and look for it. But I think that would be a critical skill today. And sometimes you just know it and you see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally understand it. Yeah. Brent, thank you so much for coming on today and talking to us.
Always, Tim. I'm happy to come back whenever you guys want. Just say the word.
Insightful as always. Just there is a user that said, "Will the session be recorded and accessible?" It is recorded. It's on LinkedIn because we've done a LinkedIn Live. Because you're a LinkedIn user, I don't know who your name is, but for some reason it's not come through. But you can re-watch it. I will be putting it on YouTube, just so you know. So it will be there on my YouTube page as well. So I'm just going to put up this comment, but I haven't read it. Part of the training.
It's cool. Hey, Zachary, thanks. I appreciate that. It's been very humbling. I'll tell you, Tim, all joking aside, not there was a lot of joking anyway, but the impact that this work has had has been intensely humbling to
I
have
can
notes
imagine.
like that. It's and not something I could have ever imagined personally or professionally, but the fact that this work has helped some in their careers is intensely gratifying. But it's all of everyone out there who's taken these ideas and applied them with bravery, with curiosity, and done amazing things with them. My hats off to all of you. So cheers. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, but I've had people come to me and say that and I still do have people that come to me and say that my book changed their lives.
Yeah.
And it is the first time it happened, I just sat there with my mouth open.
Yeah.
Because I
gobsmacked is the word. I think you Brits. I love the word gobsmacked. Right?
Gobsmacked. Yes, I was gobsmacked. Yes, which is an English word.
Yeah.
I just didn't. When I was writing it, I wrote the book because my dad's got dementia, and I just wanted him to see that his son had done something with his life. And I never thought it would sell like it did, and I never thought I would have people coming to me. And I've had people come to me and they can't speak.
Yeah.
Because they're stars, and it's like, I'm just Tim Hughes.
I'm with you. I'm just a schlub from Omaha. I tell you, I'm the same thing. Yeah, but what that tells me, Tim, honestly, is everyone listening and who will listen to this someday, that could be you too. You and I are just dudes, right? We're just people. We're just humans, and there's no reason why any one of us and every one of us can't contribute in some fashion or another. And that's what I think is so magical about all this. Is it's
I was thinking today when I was trying to find your book. I'm sure I read it on the train down to London one day.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I sat there and I thought, I wish I could write a book like this.
And there you go. Now it's sitting right behind you, over your left shoulder.
And everybody can do this, and I highly recommend it. And if you're watching this and you do want to do it, and I'm sure you will agree with me, Brent, if they reach out to us, we'll give us some advice.
100%. No, always happy to help. You guys know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also at a company now called Ecosystems, which is ecosystems.us on the web. And I'll take that offline. I'm happy to talk to anyone more about what we're doing there, which is super cool stuff.
Thank you so much for today, Brent. And thanks everybody for jumping in the conversation. It's been awesome. Really appreciate it.